pause on even issuing rules that would allow businesses to reopen. How bad is it in California?
Well, it's interesting because there are some pockets where people are being brought into Riverside from Imperial, brought into Imperial from Mexico, where we are dealing with some overcrowding. But of course, the governor is sitting in Sacramento with a one-size-fits-all. One of the strengths of President Trump is that he has said we can't make the decisions for different regions of the country from Washington. We want them made locally. And smart governors, and there are some, are pushing that down to the county level where it's appropriate. We do not necessarily have a smart governor. But you know, in your last segment, nobody knows about what a police officer can do for you more than Steve Scalise. He wouldn't have been there to do that interview if police hadn't risked their lives. There would have been a dozen dead Republican congressmen because a shooter who wanted to kill people for what they believed tried to kill him and almost did. That's what people are forgetting right now in this whole process. Police are our line of defense. They're our first line of defense, and as you said in the opening, it's so important that we not rely on our personal guns and go back to a time before organized police forces, especially when Tim Scott and others are willing to offer sensible reforms that really could make a difference.
Well, what do you think is the answer? I mean, if the Democrats want to carry this over until after the election and wouldn't at all, discuss this with Tim Scott, how long is this police reform issue going to remain open?
Well, look, Democrats want to run on the issue. Republicans are willing to run on the issue. The president's more than willing to run on the issue. But, Tim Scott has reached out his hand to negotiate. As you alluded to, if somebody has a record of infractions, maybe they weren't fired, but that record should follow them if they run to another workforce. We should root out bad apples, no question at all. And Senator Scott, I know him. He's a good man and really believes in criminal justice reform, has a record of doing just that. He'd be happy to work with them. Hopefully, when they look at this terrible bill that came over from the House, they can essentially amend that bill with Tim Scott's bill and break the filibuster and begin having a real dialogue about reforms that could happen before the election.
Well, the sad part about this is Nancy Pelosi is so dead set against working with Republicans. My fear is that, how are the American people going to end up getting any kind of reform here as cities are being torn apart while people are complaining about police reform? How long will this take?
Well, at least 63% of Americans surveyed oppose any defunding of our law enforcement, and the other 36 or 37% would still dial 911 if they were being attacked. That's the reality that we're going to face going into the election. If you want to have your law enforcement defunded, if you want to rely only on your own ability to protect yourself, if you want to go back to a time of anarchy, which we have fought since our founding, if that's what you want, vote for Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. If not, the reality is it's clear. The people who support law enforcement, sensible reforms, are the Republicans, and that's going to be on the ballot in just a few months.
Well, it will be an interesting few months, Darrell Issa, and as you campaign yourself going toward the election. Thanks so much for being with us. And coming up tonight, Senator Marsha Blackburn, Trump 2020 advisor, Corey Lewin.